Today, I'm learning what powers the Queen of England still has.
Further, as a head of state,
Really?
she also enjoyed.
I mean, how does that work?
Queen could also administer.
Okay, what? That I had no idea that she still had this much power, actually. So a while back I did a video on the difference between the UK, Great Britain, and England. Let's just say I came away from that video with a lot of questions, and I do mean a lot. One of those is, what exactly is the Queen still in charge of? Like, what powers does she still have? Because I know that even though the monarchy still exists, it doesn't really have powers in the traditional sense. You guys over in Britain have a parliament, and actually, is it England or is it Britain? What is parliament in charge of exactly? I think the Prime Minister is just England, right? See, that's like a whole other thing I have to get into, is like figuring out how your government works. But for now, I'm going to focus on the monarchy. One of the things I learned in that video also was just how big the Commonwealth still is. I seriously thought that there were just like a handful of countries left in it, but no, there are like dozens. My friend in Canada tried to explain it to me one time, and it was just kind of like, I sort of got it, but it's not quite. So I'm really excited to get into this video. Hopefully it will kind of set some of this stuff straight. And as usual, if I have some questions during it, then you guys can answer those down in the comments. Or if you just want to add something to the discussion, you guys know that I read the comments. I guess we know that Roger's excited about this video. Alright, well I guess nothing else needs to be said other than the video that we're watching today is called What Powers Does the Queen of England Actually Have? And it's from the channel Today I Found Out. I don't know that I've watched a video from this channel at all, so hopefully it's good. And as usual, you can find the link to it in the description. So I'm ready to learn more about the Queen.
So a short while ago, we put out a video about the fact that Queen Elizabeth II neither needs a passport nor a driving license, thanks to a quirk of British law. But what other powers does the Queen of many titles have, and what could she theoretically do if she decided to flex the full might of the authority that she wields? As it turns out, thanks to the royal prerogative, a terrifying amount if she really felt like it, or at least that's assuming Parliament went by the letter of the law and that the people didn't decide to stage a small revolt. In reality, the Queen rarely exerts even a fraction of the power that she theoretically wields, as it's kept in check by the only person in the UK who can tell her what to do, and that's herself. This is very much a calculated move on her part in order to stay in the good graces of her subjects. She also voluntarily pays her taxes, even though she's not technically obligated to, and that helps with people's opinion of her. Not only does she avoid openly flexing her political might, she also tends to keep her opinions outside of the public sphere. As historian Frank Prohaska notes, the real secret of royal influence is saying nothing. And anything the Queen does say publicly is pretty anodyne. The minute a monarch or many of the royals say anything remotely political or opinionated, they alienate people and they lose some power. This silence played a large part in how the British monarchy survived post-World War I when other European royal families didn't. In fact, for nearly—
That's actually extremely interesting to me. I would have never thought that the royal family avoids politics. It seems like they're kind of right in the middle of it in a lot of ways. I mean, it makes total sense, I guess, why you wouldn't want to do that, but it's just bizarre to me though, because the monarchy traditionally is what ruled the country, and they are the ones that set the politics and the policies. And so to kind of think that they're kind of totally separated from that now because they don't want to offend anybody, I mean, that's a huge, huge change. But my question is that something that's kind of unique to Queen Elizabeth, or did her predecessors also do that?
For nearly 2 decades now, the monarchy has regularly had polls run and focus groups put together to keep track of how the general public feels about them and their various actions. They also have on payroll individuals whose job it is to ensure the Queen stays in the public eye and in a way that is most likely to endear her to her subjects. Similar—
I mean, it's pretty much like every single politician here in the US too. It's just what they do.
—to politicians who rely on the voting public, with each public change she presents, right down to the carrying of a cell phone or not, carefully calculated in terms of the impact it might have. While this may seem only self-serving, the Queen has a very lengthy track record as an admirable public servant, and is also acutely aware that she is a prominent public face representing her subjects, so is keen on avoiding being viewed in a bad light, lest she in turn paints them in a bad light by her actions. As she noted—
Sorry I keep pausing it so much, it's just that I keep having this stuff pop into my head that I want to ask. It seems very, very, like, almost off-putting to me, maybe as an American. I don't know, maybe you guys feel this way too in Britain. But he's just talking about the Queen's subjects. To me, that's a very, like, condescending way to put it. Like, I wouldn't take very well to being called a subject So is that like an actual term that you guys use a lot in England, or is that just something that he's putting in here for this video? I don't know. What are your personal feelings on that? How do you guys view that over in England?
She noted at the tender age of 21 in a speech to the Commonwealth she gave on her birthday, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong." Surprisingly, for many years the full extent of exactly what powers the Queen handed off to the government, but technically retained, weren't publicly known. That is, until 2003, when the government released a partial list of the things it could do on the Queen's behalf. For the most part, the list confirmed that the government could do things to save the Queen time, such as issue or revoke passports, which simply wouldn't be a feasible thing to be the sole prerogative of the Crown in a modern society. However, some were actually slightly worried by some of the things she could do, like declare war, which under rules of royal prerogative can be done without consulting Parliament. On top of that, the Queen is totally immune from prosecution and is considered above the law in the UK. And further, as a head of state,
Really?
she also enjoys diplomatic immunity in any foreign country she happens to visit. As such, she could commit any crime conceivable anywhere on Earth, at least as the law currently stands, and suffer no legal consequences for doing so.
Okay, but is that just English law, or what about the laws of other countries? Because if she goes there and does something against the law in that country, can they possibly hold her liable for that? Or, I mean, how does that work?
However, as with everything else, she's generally exceptionally careful to ensure that she doesn't break any laws. Of course, what she does in private is completely her own affair, despite her prominent political position, as she is exempt from freedom of information requests. So, moving on, because technically speaking the people of Britain are not citizens but subjects of the monarch, she could have anyone she wanted arrested and presumably seize their property or land for the Crown. Speaking of which, the Queen owns all of the seabeds around the UK and can commandeer any ship found in British waters for service to the realm. Oddly enough, she also has first dibs on any whales that wash up on shore. The Queen could also administer any manner of punishment to an individual who offended or otherwise displeased her, as the Crown has prerogative power to keep the peace within the realm. And since she's immune from prosecution, nobody could really do anything if this punishment wasn't entirely within the scope of the law. If the government tried to stop her, the Queen could decimate the British political landscape by dissolving Parliament and appointing anyone she felt like as Prime Minister. This is because it's the Queen's duty to appoint the Prime Minister, and she could, in theory, appoint anyone she wanted to the position, regardless of the way the British public voted in an election.
Okay, what? Okay, you guys are gonna have to explain that to me, because I thought that the Prime Minister was literally just put in place by your votes, so she actually has the power to put whoever she wants in that position. See, I had no idea about that. I thought that they were completely separate entities, but I didn't know that they were connected like that. So, also a lot of these other things he's saying is very, very worrying that you guys don't have any legal protection against a lot of this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that she would do that. I know Queen Elizabeth is really loved, and she's not the type of monarch to kind of do a lot of this stuff. I mean, but what's to say that somebody down the road who gets into power wouldn't do some of this stuff? I mean, it's probably very unlikely, but at the same time, I don't know. Like, I just don't like the idea of not really being able to do anything if some crazy person happened to get into power, a king or a queen, later on down the road and decided to do what crazy people do. I mean, we've seen throughout history what can happen, so I don't know, maybe there are other ways to keep the monarch's power in check that he's not talking about here, but I don't know. You guys can let me know. Let me know what you think about all of this. I'm just saying that I had no idea that she still had this much power, actually. I don't know, I'm just really kind of shocked that she still has this kind of power, even if it's just on paper.
On top of that, in the event the Queen didn't like the outcome of an election, for instance, if she didn't like the replacement Parliament members that were voted in, she could just call for another one using royal prerogative until she got the Parliament she wanted. Not that she'd need to, because if she really wanted, she'd just bring in the army to keep everyone in line. But how does that work? How does she control the army? Well, that's because the Queen is also the commander-in-chief of the entire British military, with every officer, soldier, sailor, and pilot swearing allegiance to the Crown and nobody else. They're not called Her Majesty's Armed Forces for nothing. Being considered the ultimate authority on all British military matters, the Queen could authorize a nuclear strike on France or make North Korea an ally, as she has the power to declare both war and peace with foreign nations. As for laws, well, technically the Queen can't create new laws, she can only sign them into law after they've been decided upon by Parliament. In fact, her royal assent is required to make the law official after being passed by Parliament in the first place. She could appoint ministers who'd make any laws she wanted a reality and then just sign them into law that way. Beyond royal assent, there's also the Queen's consent, which requires she give her consent before any law that affects the interests of the monarchy can even be discussed at all in Parliament. She actually has used this power before, such as in 1999 when she refused to allow the discussion of a bill that would have given Parliament power to authorize military strikes in Iraq instead of needing her authorization. So, well, that's all on the political side, but it doesn't stop here. The Queen technically has a sort of power not only over her subjects' physical beings, but also their souls. Well, how? Well, that's because she's also the head of the Church of England, including having the power to appoint archbishops and power over many other such matters concerning the Church. As for most of these powers that technically allow her to rule with an iron fist, as previously mentioned, the Queen is hesitant to ever use them in such a way that would displease her subjects, and certainly isn't about to disregard their representatives in Parliament. However, these powers still exist for a variety of reasons, including potentially being needed in times of extreme crisis. That said, just because she isn't in the practice of exercising her powers against the will of the people, it doesn't mean she isn't occasionally an active political powerhouse in private. Extremely well respected and known worldwide with the ability to bend the ear of most heads of state, the influence the Queen wields is difficult to quantify, but, as noted in an article discussing why the BBC named the Queen the most powerful woman in the world in their list of 100 most powerful women, Her Majesty's power is more about influence. A discreet nod of the head, a polite word in the ear of a Prime Minister at their weekly meeting, or a strategic patronage of a cause being overlooked by the government is how she can indirectly affect our world without us even knowing. Well, to conclude, the Queen has many powers she could theoretically legally use to her own ends unless her subjects and Parliament simply decided to stage a revolution. However, she generally avoids doing anything overt that might upset her subjects and otherwise simply works in the background, more or less in an advisory role when she feels there is a need.
Alright, well, there we go. That didn't quite go as into depth as I would have liked because I still don't quite know what power she has over the Commonwealths and stuff, so I'll probably have to find another video on that. If you guys can recommend a good one for me, please let me know. But this video was extremely informative with kind of how she still has powers over England itself. Now, I get it. Like, a lot of this stuff is kind of scary to think about what the monarch is still capable of doing. But Queen Elizabeth obviously is pretty benevolent and, like he said, wouldn't do anything to really upset her subjects too much. But what's kind of like a red flag for me personally is just that on paper, there is still that path for the monarch to wield a lot more power if they really wanted to. And there doesn't seem to be really any checks except for if Parliament wants to stage a revolt like he said. It's actually a lot more different from the US government than I thought it was. But maybe I need to watch more on Parliament and the Prime Minister to kind of see how they govern and to get the whole picture. You know, some things were very similar in that. For instance, the President of the US is also the Commander-in-Chief of the military, but the military in the US pledges to defend the Constitution and they don't really do a personal pledge to the President. So that was a little different. And also the whole like Church of England thing as well. Now I know a lot of you guys brought up the point that the United States is actually way more religious than England, and that's very true. We are. We do print like "In God We Trust" on our money. We do pray in Congress. The Ten Commandments are still displayed in the Supreme Court. But that said, we do not have any sort of state religion or an official church here in the US, and the president is actually completely separate from any sort of religious organization. So when I talk about like the separation of church and state, I just mean like on paper. So please don't take any of my comments as being critical towards you guys in any way. I'm just kind of giving you my first impression as an American and looking at the differences between kind of the way you guys do things over there and the way we do things here. So the way you guys do things over there seems really interesting. You guys have a mix of the monarch and Parliament and the Prime Minister, and then you have the Commonwealths, and I don't know, it would be really interesting for me to kind of learn more about all of that and how all of that operates in a more in-depth way. So anyway, there you go. If you guys can recommend any other videos kind of relating to this subject, let me know. So I'm just here to learn and I can give you my American perspective, but I would also like to hear the British perspective and kind of what you guys think about all of this. So anyway, let me know down in the comments, and also if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like and subscribe. We're going to be getting back to the Napoleonic Wars next, and I kind of made a mistake. There's only like 13 videos in that series instead of like 20 something, so we're getting close to the halfway point, so it's not going to take quite as long to get through it as I thought it was going to. But Roger and I have a lot of content coming your way still, so make sure you stay tuned for that, and we will see you next time.